ridiculous, and they laugh in the face of the truth. So as you expand your consciousness, you expand your perception of possibility, which means you then start to encompass things that you would have dismissed before. This is happening on an increasingly vast scale.
And what we've discovered at the core basis of the universe, the foundation of the universe, is this single universal field of intelligence, a field which unites gravity with electromagnetism, light, with radioactivity, with the nuclear force, so that all the forces of nature and all the so-called particles of nature, quarks, leptons, protons, neutrons, are now understood to be one. They're all just different ripples on a single ocean of existence. That's called the unified field or superstring field, and it's a mathematical tour de force. But we have realized Einstein's dream. He dedicated half of his life to discovering this unified field, and now in the context of the superstring, that has been achieved. So, unified field theories based on the superstring identify a single universal field of intelligence, an ocean of existence, at the basis of everything, mind and matter. And all the so-called particles of the universe, the forces in our universe, everything in the universe are just ripples on that ocean of existence. That's the unified field. And that field is not as a non-material field. It is ultimately the field of consciousness. What is the physics of consciousness? We can ask that question today. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? What are the origins of consciousness? What are the limits of human potential? We're in a position to actually answer that now, I believe, although there's certainly not consensus yet in the scientific community about that. But with the real cutting-edge knowledge, the discovery of the unified field, the so-called superstring field, we now understand that life is fundamentally one. At the basis of all life's diversity, there is unity. At our basis, you and I are one. And that unity, at the basis of mind and matter, is consciousness, universal consciousness. So with that deep understanding that consciousness isn't created by the brain, it's not purely an outcome of molecular chemical processes in the brain, but is fundamental in nature. It's the very core of nature. We call it the unified field. Now that we have that foundational understanding of what consciousness is, we can solve the mind-body problem. We can see how consciousness percolates up through our physiology to become the consciousness that we experience and see, and sensory perception and all of that.
When we look around us, even at our own bodies, what we see is the tip of the iceberg.
Think of this for a moment. Take your hand and look at it. Now, your hand looks solid, but it's really not. If you put it under a proper microscope, you'd see a mass of energy vibrating.
Everything is made up of the exact same thing, whether it's your hand, whether it's the ocean, or whether it's a star.
Everything is energy. And let me help you understand that just a little bit. There's the universe, of course, and our galaxy, and our planet, and then individuals, and then inside of this body are organ systems, and then there's cells, and then there's molecules, and then there's atoms, and then there is energy. So there are a lot of levels to talk about something on, but everything in the universe is energy.
I don't care what city you're living in, you've got enough power in your body, potential power, to illuminate the whole city for nearly a week.
Everything in creation is the same energy, and energy is consciousness. They are the same thing. So the energy that is our minds and our emotions and us is the same energy that is every blade of grass and every insect and every tree and every breath we take, every drop of rain. Just as water, clouds and ice are the same substance in very different states of being, so everything that exists in creation is the same energy consciousness in different states of being. We are like droplets of water in an ocean of consciousness, unique and individual, yes, but together forming the whole. We are each other. I am you, you are me, I am everything, and everything is me. Same with everyone.
What has struck me is that nothing, the negative, the empty, is exceedingly powerful. Nothing is more fertile than emptiness. I would say, not ex nihilo nihil fit, out of nothing comes nothing, but I would say you can't have something without nothing. For how do we basically begin to think about the difference between something and nothing? I can say, there is a cigar in my right hand and there is no cigar in my left hand. And so we get the idea of is here and isn't or empty here. But behind that, of course, lies the far more obvious contrast of solid and space. Now, we tend to think of space as nothing. When we talk about the conquest of space, there's a little element, notice, of hostility in that phrase. But actually, we're talking about the conquest of distance. Space as such, that is to say, whatever it is that lies between the Earth and the Moon and the Earth and the Sun, is considered to be just nothing at all. But to suggest how very powerful and important this nothing at all is, let me point out to you that if you didn't have space, you couldn't have anything solid. To begin with, without space outside the solid, you wouldn't know where the solid's edges were. For example, you can see me on the camera because you see a background here and all around me, and that background shows up my outline. It's, for example, difficult to see a hand unless there is a contrasting background. Were there no background to the hand itself would vanish. Nothing is more fertile than emptiness. But you always have to have a background to see a figure. You just can't do without it. To have the whole idea of there being only space and nothing else at all is not only inconceivable but perfectly meaningless, because we always know what we mean by contrasts. We know what we mean by white in comparison with black. They must come into being together. Because of the inseparability of these opposites, they always go together. This, as it were, hints at some kind of unity which underlies them. You don't have first something and then nothing, or first nothing and then something. This unity is called Tao. Space and form, in that sense, go together as the fundamental things we're dealing with in this universe. That which is void is precisely form, and that which is form is precisely void. Now, it's amazing what doesn't exist in the real world. In the real world, there aren't any things, nor are there any events. That doesn't mean to say that the real world is a perfectly featureless blank. It means that it is a marvelous system of wiggles. You cannot have the ups without the downs. Now, the same thing is true of all life together. We shouldn't really contrast existence with non-existence. The unconscious is, so to say, the part of experience which is doing consciousness, just as the trough manifests the wave, the space manifests the solid, the background manifests the figure. So it's interconnected. And so the many, many patterns of interconnections lock it all together into a unity, which is, however, much too complicated for us to think about, except in very, very simple, crude ways. But I am part of all this. And so all that side of life which you call unconscious, unknown, impenetrable, is unconscious and is unknown and is impenetrable because it's really you.
How does something as immaterial as consciousness ever arise from something as unconscious as matter? We assume that matter is unconscious, and therefore our brain cells are unconscious, and all the chemical, electrical activity that goes on is unconscious. How the hell does consciousness come out of it? The fundamental assumption that is not questioned